What are the absolute worst decisions you can make in Fallout New Vegas? With some of the furthest reaching, most morally challenging choices of any Fallout game ever, it can be tough to know when you've done the right thing. So, here are 10 instances where you probably definitely didn't. Either locking yourself out of some awesome, unique content, or just winding up a downright terrible person. But first, a quick word from today's video sponsor, OperaGX, who I've partnered with many times on this channel because I find turning my boring everyday browser into an extension of my favorite video game worlds to be an incredibly fun thing to do. Customizing not just the look, but also sounds and general ambiance of games like Fallout, Cyberpunk, and much more. With live wallpapers, like this iconic one of the Courier stood outside New Vegas, accompanied by the same audible keystrokes and tabbing sounds that you'll hear when using the computers in Fallout. Granted, the OperaGX UI is definitely more sophisticated, but that's certainly for the best here. Plus, you can easily toggle on and off your favorite tracks from the Mojave whilst browsing, and with the very intuitive browser mod settings, you can even mix and match different features from a range of mods to create your personal ultimate mashup of things from your favorite games. Custom fonts, browser icons, splash screens, even shaders to change the entire feel of your screen. The only thing left to do is transfer everything you love from your boring old browser, which couldn't really be much easier. Just go to settings, scroll down to synchronization, import bookmarks and settings, and voila, everything just as you left it. So, if you want to bring the feel of Fallout or any other world you love with you as you browse online, then check out OperaGX for free via my link in the description. But now, back to the Mojave, to explore some truly terrible decisions. Kicking things off, after being shot in the head by Benny at the start of the game, the Courier makes a miraculous recovery, thanks, in no small part, to the efforts and skill of Doc Mitchell in Goodsprings, a quaint little mining town out in the Mojave, blessed with a decent water source and inhabited by good and decent townsfolk. Without the existence of Goodsprings, the Courier's adventures in New Vegas would have been over before they'd even begun. Now, usually we can repay a favor to the town. Around the same time we rolled in, a guy named Ringo also arrived on the run from a pursuing gang known as the Powder Gangers, former NCR convicts who liberated themselves from the nearby NCR correctional facility. Ringo refused to pay a toll for wandering through their lands, and now is forced to hide behind the light protection of Goodsprings, who, again, good people, refused to turn him over to this glorified gang of raiders. Literally, the Powder Gangers are basically just a raider group with a proper name. So we have a choice: repay our debt to Goodsprings, extend their charity to us onto another poor soul, encourage the town to band together, and repel the really quite small assault force of 6 Powder Gangers led by Joe Cobb, obtaining a caps reward from Ringo as thanks. In fact, another reason that siding with Ringo is in our own self-interests is that he teaches us to play Caravan, setting us up with the initial 30-card deck that we need. But of course, with really no motivation other than what we make up ourselves, the Courier can go to Joe Cobb and suggest that together we take over the not very defended town of Goodsprings, potentially citing no other reason than that it's easy pickings. What's more, before we can even attack and take over the town, Joe will send us to single-handedly find and take out Ringo. You know, the whole reason that the Powder Gangers were even here in the first place. So we're no longer assaulting the town to find Ringo, we're just doing it because. And then, as part of the setup, we also go back to Doc Mitchell, the very man that saved our life after a point-blank bullet to the head. And, as thanks to the good doctor, we can lie to him, dupe him out of all his spare medical supplies on the pretense that somebody else down the road is injured and needs help, preying on the very kindness and charity of this former Vault 21 dweller that made him save us. Then go and give all of those meds to the Powder Gangers to aid their survival in assaulting the town, an assault that Doc Mitchell and every other named character who helped in our recovery will be fighting in on the other side and lose.
Never thought I'd ever have my own town, but thanks to you, now I do. If you want to make some caps, head on over to the correctional facility.
A hell of a way to pay back the town for saving our life and doing a good thing. But hey, as Caesar's Legion would say, good is not a meaningful vector in history, only strength. And, I suppose, in this case, Goodsprings' goodness is what ultimately spelled their downfall. One hell of a way to establish an Ultimate Legion-affiliated playthrough. What's more, doing it this way does allow easier access to the NCR Correctional Facility later for the quest I Fought the Law. But it is still possible to do that quest without violently slaughtering the town that saved our life. If we complete the opposing quest, Ghost Town Gunfight, where we rightfully defend Goodsprings, provided we don't kill any powder gangers directly, we can still blag our way into the correctional facility. Our powder ganger reputation won't be as high, but that doesn't really matter. They have no larger role in the endgame, and really are just a group of raiders in prison uniforms. A bit later on, when arriving at the town of Novak in pursuit of Benny, the residents will ask us for some help in clearing some feral ghouls from their nearby Repcon test site before they descend on the town. But this routine extermination job quickly proves to be something far larger and far stranger than it first appears. Arriving at the test site, it is indeed overrun by feral ghouls on the first level. But upstairs are a group of much more sentient, almost religious-seeming ghouls led by a glowing one named Jason Bright. They also have a deluded human in their ranks named Chris, who's totally convinced that he too is a ghoul, doing the gruffly voice and everything. Turns out that this group of ghouls have a plan to escape this irradiated world aboard a fleet of rockets buried below this facility, going on a great journey to a place of light and healing. The only problem is that the basement housing the rockets has been overrun by a group of Nightkin. Very quickly, this simple job is becoming more complex. The group of Stealth Boy-obsessed supermutants are led by one individual called Davison, who himself answers to an inanimate Brahmin skull which he calls Antler, though he is still sane enough to at least engage in conversation with us, explaining that the Nightkin only came here as they heard the place contained a shipment of Stealth Boys. We can either learn that the Stealth Boys are not actually in this facility, leading the Nightkin to depart peacefully, or we can remove them all with lethal force. Definitely a challenge if you're at lower level. With the Nightkin dealt with though, the ghouls are free to resume their voyage to the stars, almost. Now they just need a couple more salvaged parts to get their rockets ready for launch. And this brings us back to Chris. Originally an engineer for the reactor in Vault 34, Chris believed his prolonged proximity to a nuclear reactor would turn him into a ghoul. And when most of the residents left Vault 34 and mostly formed into the Boomers, Chris discovered this group and believed he had found his people. Unable to convince him otherwise and recognizing his engineering skill, Jason and the other ghouls eventually gave up trying to convince Chris that he was human, concluding him instead to be a gift from their creator. But if we, a human, can actually be persuasive enough to convince Chris of his humanity, he'll be devastated, suggesting that instead of fixing the rockets, we sabotage the engines with sugar bombs. This is one of the terrible outcomes to this quest, I would say. Did the ghouls deceive Chris? Yes, but only after copious attempts of their own to convince him of the truth, after which they still cared for him all the same. The only reason he can't go on the rockets with them is because only actual ghouls could survive the radiation in the launch sites and possibly in space. Is Chris therefore right to not only sabotage but try to kill this entire group? I would say that's pretty ungrateful. But even still, a courier just wanting to watch the world burn, or perhaps just genuinely kill all the ghouls in this facility as requested by Novak, can go along with the plan. Or not. We can simply go and get the needed parts and send the ghouls off on their great journey. After all, ensuring former human sentience survives beyond a dying Earth is kind of a big thing. So, with a rousing final speech from Jason Bright, we are tasked with hitting the launch controls on the observation deck, at which point, regardless of what's happened with Chris, we're left a couple of final options. With a high enough science, the ghouls' trajectory can be tweaked, actually sending them closer to their destination. Or we can simply program the rockets to crash into one another. Because, after all that work, clearing the facility, and additional salvaging, why the hell wouldn't we screw it up at the final second? Denying these people a chance, maybe just a small chance to begin with, to live among the stars. Well, at least we can go and tell Novak that the ghouls are all definitely dead, though in fairness, we were getting rid of them, literally taking them off the face of the planet, regardless. So really, this is just needlessly evil for the sake of needless evil. Next up, the standard Pip-Boy is cool and all, a staple of Fallout if ever there was one, but New Vegas also has its special Vegas-themed variant named the Pip-Boy 3 billion. An item that can be obtained during the quest How Little We Know with the Amateurs, but can also be very easily permanently missed. This quest needs to be completed regardless of who you align yourself with for the main questline, so you will inevitably be pushed towards it in any playthrough. The key thing to do before getting into the quest itself at Gamora, though, is to head to Mick and Ralph's in Freeside. The same place we'll go to obtain the program for Fisto, everyone's favorite robot in the wasteland.
Please assume the position.
Anyway, heading to the back of the store to speak to their arms dealer Mick and asking how's business is the main thing you need to do before resolving things at Gamora. Mick will want to know why the Amateurs stopped buying their guns, and we can later resolve this issue alongside everything else at Gamora. What happens next, though, will depend on how exactly we resolve the situation with the Amateurs, something which itself can be a particularly evil decision if we go along with the Legion-affiliated plan to wipe out everyone else on the strip. But, funnily enough, choosing this path won't hardlock us out of the Pip-Boy 3 billion. Turning in Kachino's journal and ensuring the original bosses remain in charge, we'll then simply need to pass a speech check of 50, convincing the bosses to buy from Mick and Ralph again, perhaps as a favor for all of our help, though otherwise Nero and Big Sal remain generally unpleasant. Whilst that whole timeline of events is certainly an evil decision, fair enough if it was a deliberate, Legion siding with one. The more easily screwed up part with the Pip-Boy 3 billion, though, happens when siding with Kachino and, doing the right thing for the strip. During this series of events, we'll need to seek out the help of Troik, the guy who procures the weapons for the Amateurs and can tell us where they are so that we can destroy them. But to first get his help, we'll need to get Troik out of his contract with the Amateurs. Now, there are 3 ways of doing this, but interestingly, if we want to get the Pip-Boy 3 billion, we'll have to do it the legitimate way, by going to Big Sal and negotiating Troik out of it. There is also a high speech option to convince Troik to help us anyway, which we want to avoid, and we don't want to obtain the blackmail letter from Big Sal's safe. Instead, we simply want to offer to help Troik out of his contract, go to Big Sal, and either pay or convince him to let Troik go. For whatever reason, and perhaps it's purely game coding, only this way can we then return to Mick and share the exciting news that the Amateurs have agreed to begin trading again.
Outstanding. You have no idea how much this means to me, but I think this little beauty will give you an idea.
The Pip-Boy 3 billion is a gold and diamond encrusted Pip-Boy, which realistically would probably get you robbed more so than anything. But given the amount of time we'll be in this menu across a playthrough, having something a little more snazzy is certainly worth getting. And if you prefer, we can ask Mick to switch back to our original Pip-Boy whenever we want. Just very easy to miss permanently if you are pursuing a good playthrough, so be very careful what you do and don't do during the Amateurs quest, and maybe make a hard save just before starting it, in case. After its population spiraled and its residents didn't appreciate having their guns confiscated, a group of dwellers from Vault 34 fought their way out of their vaults and into the Mojave Wasteland, taking up residence at the nearby Nellis Air Force Base and forming into the group known today as the Boomers. Surrounding themselves with howitzer artillery cannons and a ridiculous amount of ammunition, the Boomers turned the base into an outside vault, if ever there was one. Not impenetrable exactly, it's just that literally anyone who comes near gets mercilessly obliterated by artillery fire. I guess treat everyone as a threat, and nobody can be. That is until we make it through the bombardment. With luck, or skill, or having a sprint mod installed, which in this case feels unfair, we can reach the Boomers and begin to open up their world, as well as be rewarded with strings of new quests. For Jack the mechanic, who's been confined to the base his entire life, our ability to come and go presents an opportunity too tempting to pass up.
Well, the thing is, there's this girl, this special girl, and sometimes it's like she's watching me back with her binoculars. Except she's probably just watching Nellis. I haven't tried waving.
Okay, right now this is walking a fine line between cute and potentially stalkerish, but I guess without the stalking.
Oh, you can't miss her. She has short red hair and she's the most beautiful woman who ever lived.
In fairness, Jack's probably only ever seen the other boomers, and the internet doesn't exist, so it's not necessarily as weird if we consider the context. And in fact, venturing out to the Crimson Caravans to find Janet, it turns out that these two have actually been admiring each other from afar, presenting an opportunity in this generally hopeless wasteland to bring two young hearts together to, run free and all that.
Is there any way the boomers would let me visit Nellis?
Except with a high enough speech skill, we can convince Janet to run free into Nellis without actually getting permission from the boomers.
Really? Thank you so much. I'll get going right away.
Just hearing that rumbling sound a few seconds before the howitzer hits, it gives you time to reflect on what you've just done. I mean, we could spin this that we're trying to make Jack see that his people's fire-first policy has flaws, but in this wasteland, it has actually worked out well for the group.
You're a terrible person. I loved her, and you let her run right into our kill zone. Why didn't you stop her?
It's a tragedy. She loved you so much. She risked it all.
Oh, my sweet, blameless Red. Curse the walls of Nellis. Curse our guns and isolation. Her blood is on our hands.
I mean, if you like romantic tragedies, then you do get to make your own here. Two lovers in a world ravaged by war who fall in love from afar and die trying to reach each other despite having never spoken, but otherwise this is just needlessly horrible. Not least because it's actually possible to convince the boomers to let Janet in to spend her life with Jack. And I mean, eventually the boomers' gene pool would probably have gotten too shallow anyway, so letting people in was going to become necessary. Not only that, but if we do upset Jack by getting the love of his life killed and don't manage to lie about her risking everything, Jack won't give us the rebreather later on in the boomers' quests, an item that we can keep for the rest of the game and which allows us to breathe underwater, mainly useful for obtaining the B-29 bomber during the specific quests where we get it, but also useful elsewhere in flooded vault sections and stuff. So this is not only a terrible decision for Jack and Janet, but also potentially for us later on. If the Ametas are the mobster family of New Vegas, then the White Glove Society are the high-class, eloquent members of the Strip living in the Ultra Luxe, the place where the wealthiest, most influential people in Vegas society go to unwind. Probably the most pre-warlike establishment in Vegas. Unfortunately, on our first visit there, it's clear not everything is quite as perfect as it seems.
Beg your pardon, stranger, but I'm looking for someone. You ain't seen a young man with dark brown hair and a white hat on lately, have you?
Heck Gunderson is one of the most successful, high-profile Brahmin barons of California, and his son went missing in the Ultra Luxe. So, agreeing to help and asking around, we quickly hear some interesting things about the White Glove Society's past.
The White Glove Society has never and will never consume human flesh for any reason. It's written in the charter. We do not engage in cannibalism here under any circumstances. Though we haven't always been the White Glove Society. There was another time, a dark time, when we went by a different name.
Yeah, the White Gloves used to be cannibals, and when Mr. House allowed them to become one of the three main families on the Strip, he strictly outlawed that aspect of their culture in the contract they signed. But by speaking to Mortimer, the maitre d' of this establishment, we can convince him to let on about his true nature. Or if we ourselves have actually taken the cannibal perk, well, no convincing then required. Mortimer's plan was to serve the White Glove Society members a dish of human meat without them knowing, before then telling them all what they'd just eaten, hoping that their reaction would be, oh no. Anyway, guess we're all cannibals now then. Unfortunately, the original target for this meal escaped capture, and the replacement the henchman chose was, you guessed it, Ted Gunderson, whose high-profile father is now making a major fuss out in the lobby. Now, there are a lot of branching outcomes to this quest, but quite a clear line can be drawn between cannibal ones and not cannibal ones. We can investigate the Ultra Luxe, find and free Ted and make sure he doesn't get eaten, but we can also follow Mortimer's plan began in several ways, serving somebody to the members of the White Glove Society. This can involve procuring the original targets, allowing Ted to go free and avoiding that trouble for the White Gloves, or we can even have one of our companions take Ted's place in the freezer, permanently removing them from the game, along with any possessions or side quests we had left to do with them. Clearly, that's the worst, most consequential decision for us as a player, but you'd have to be pretty deliberately evil about doing it. Or, avoiding the risk of a now kidnapped Ted tarnishing the White Glove Society's reputation, we can go through with making him the meal at the White Glove Society banquet. Except, if we do that, Heck Gunderson isn't going to stop searching for his son and is going to raise hell for the White Gloves. That is, unless he is implicated as the murderer. By collecting samples of Ted Gunderson's blood and then scattering them around Heck Gunderson's suite, that's apparently enough to implicate him as his own son's murderer, with no consideration that somebody else could have done the murder in this room, nor any further investigation into the killing of Heck's hired hands if we're also forced to take them out. In fact, all it takes is to approach the nearest Securitron on the strip and say, "I heard sounds of a struggle in the ultra-luxe penthouse," after which this robot assures us it's going to do the right thing.
Rest assured, I will apprehend the perpetrator and see him or her punished, even though in some ways, evil is its own punishment.
Saying all this while staring at the actual murderer. Some time passes, and House's faultless Securitron no doubt investigates and puts two and two together before coming to one infallible conclusion.
Ted Gunderson, you're under arrest for the murder of Ted Gunderson.
Blazes. That's my son you're talking about. He ain't dead. I'm looking for him.
It is my duty to inform you that murder is a serious crime. As a murderer, you should be feeling emotions such as guilt, sorrow, and shame.
Civilizing prim
If
is
not,
what we can do
you may
for
wish to
everyone
consult
else in this
a
town.
mental health professional.
Where's my son? What'd you do with my boy?
I hope this experience has taught you an important lesson about the value of human life.
You can't do this to me. This is a mistake.
Dead or alive, you're coming with me.
The hell I will.
Stand back, citizens. Deceased bodies are a known source of illness and a potential tripping hazard.
Well, justice was sure served there. What's more, having Heck Gunderson out of the way ensures that Brahmin beef remains less accessible for the majority of citizens, staying a rare delicacy in the ultra-luxe. Though, thanks to our decisions, the core members will now frequently be dining on another type of meat, it seems.
Everyone at the banquet loved it. I told them what it was and the room was quiet for a moment, but then we all had a hearty laugh.
It's kind of insane just how dark this group can become, and we're the ones to potentially make it all happen. And there's definitely something to be said about how the depth of these evil choices gives a lot more value to the good ones that we can also make. Speaking of good people, Boone is someone that at a glance you'd certainly say is affiliated with the side of good. He's actually a pain to travel around with sometimes when trying to maintain peaceful relations with everyone, as he'll attack Caesar's Legion without hesitation any time we get near them, unless we wander around disguised in Legion armor, in which case the NCR will then mistake us for a legionary and attack instead. So yeah, it can be a pain to manage. Boone, however, is traumatized by the actions from his past. A former NCR soldier, Boone took part in the Bitter Springs Massacre, an event where the NCR shot many women, children, sick, and elderly members of the Great Khans thanks to a miscommunication with NCR commands. The events haunted Boone, and he would eventually leave the army after meeting his future wife Carla while on leave at the New Vegas Strip. The two would eventually settle down in the small town of Novak, where his squad mate Manny Vargas would also follow. Carla, however, was unimpressed by their new small life, her attitude driving Boone and Manny apart. Until one night, where Caesar's Legion snuck into the town, kidnapping just Carla, who was also now pregnant. Boone asked his friend, Manny, for help tracking her down, but Manny couldn't hide the fact that he was secretly pleased Carla was gone, the woman who'd ruined his and Boone's friendship. Eventually, Boone tracked down his wife alone, held captive at a Legion slave auction. Knowing that he could never take down that many legionaries and rescue his wife by his lonesome, Boone did the only thing he could to save Carla and their unborn child from a life of slavery, firing just one shot from his rifle at her head before immediately being forced to flee. Now, a lonely and depressed guardsman back in Novak, Boone realized that in order for the Legion's kidnapping to be such a success, somebody from inside the town must have helped. So, when we roll in, an outsider, Boone, having little other recourse, asks whether we can help find out who helped the Legion, if indeed there is anybody to find, hatching a completely flawless plan for us to send whoever did it in front of the dinosaur, then to equip his beret, signaling to Boone to mercilessly take them out. Now, in fairness, the man's been through a lot. It's understandable he's not necessarily of sound mind, but come on, to trust a stranger not to abuse a free trigger finger, he's kind of asking us to abuse this power. Indeed, we can now tell literally anyone in town to go and wait outside by the dinosaur, and Boone, without hesitation, will blow their head off, before perhaps realizing his mistake when we say, "I just wanted you to kill him," or her.
You sick bastard. You better be ready to join him.
We can even take this so far as to offer up Boone's former friend and squad mate, Manny Vargas. Now, Manny admittedly could have drawn a tiny amount of suspicion since Carla drove a wedge between him and Boone, but still, the fact that Boone places absolute trust in us over his actual former friend says a lot. And with a fairly low speech check, we can even convince Boone that we got it right with Manny and that he was to blame. We'll still then get Boone as a companion, despite having wrongfully made him kill a former very close friend. And asking about Manny in this case, Boone will say this:
"Don't ever say that name again."
The truth of who actually sold Carla and why though is arguably even more disturbing. Jeannie Mae Crawford, owner of the motel, didn't like Carla's dissatisfaction with Novak, so decided that an appropriate and no doubt profitable solution was to sell her into Legion slavery for just 1,000 bottle caps, plus another 500 for the unborn child, keeping the bill of sale to then collect on another 500 when the child was fully grown. Hence the reason we can still find it tucked away in her safe. She sold a pregnant woman to slavers because said woman was making the town look bad. That's very almost the plot of Hot Fuzz. What's more, for the time after, Jeannie kept trying to spin it that Carla had simply grown tired and run off, which, thinking about it, should have actually maybe tipped Boone off since he did find and kill his wife. But anyway, abusing the power of the beret is a tempting, if evil, choice we can make, but learning the truth is arguably even more disturbing. The NCR may be closer to good guys than most out in the Mojave, but there's still plenty of examples for them being evil or just downright stupid. Take Helios 1, for example, a solar plant which secretly powers an orbital space laser that was formerly held by the Brotherhood of Steel. But when the Brotherhood were forced out because the much larger NCR wanted this power for themselves, they gained control of the plant but lacked any expertise to harness its power, which had been taken offline by the Brotherhood. They were going to need an expert to get Helios 1 running again. Somebody with a fantastic understanding of theoretical physics who could fully comprehend just how the solar array works. So, the NCR, in all their great competence, put the solar array under the control of this guy.
They were going door to door asking if anyone knew any scientists. I said, look no further. They asked me if I knew anything about power plants. I said as much as anyone I had ever met. They asked me how well I understood theoretical physics. I said I had a theoretical degree in physics. They said, welcome aboard.
They said, welcome aboard. I guess that far in the future, the concept of a degree is entirely theoretical anyway, unless you're pre-war. And thus far, Fantastic has the plant running at 1% efficiency and enjoys making up ideas for what all the buttons might do. Luckily, the only console he's actually been messing with is the intercom system. This is where we come in. Warrior of the Mojave that we are, the courier is actually capable of realigning the solar arrays and, more importantly, fighting through the security system in the tower to get it all up and running again, with several choices then as to what exactly we can do with the power. Fantastic, as per the order of the NCR, requests that we divert it to the Strip and Cap McCarran, you know, the two places in the area that already have plenty of power thanks to the Hoover Dam, but ensuring the NCR now has plenty of backup power should they ever need it. Not the most benevolent option, but also not the worst one. The power will further strengthen the NCR, and they are far from the worst option for ruling the wastelands, though Fantastic will take the majority of the credit for himself.
Oh shit! Oh, I knew I could do it. Those NCR pricks can all get on their knees and worship at the altar of fucking Fantastic.
Luckily, this guy wasn't the only scientist we could talk to in the facility. Ignacio Rivers is also there on behalf of the followers of the apocalypse, and he believes the power should be diverted to people more in need of it, opening up options to divert the power to Vegas's outer regions, West Side and Freeside, or to just evenly distribute Helios 1's energy across the Mojave, ensuring that everyone gets some power, but nobody gets enough for it to be as reliable or useful, with frequent brownouts likely. In terms of doing the most good, West Side and Freeside will probably have the most noticeable good effects on people, at least in the short term, but we also have the option of overloading the power station completely, ensuring that nobody gets access to Helios 1 and that its power can neither be used nor abused, which could possibly be for the best once we see the final option, using Helios 1 to arm the orbital space laser called Archimedes 2. Now, from a personal player perspective, this is certainly the most fun and noticeable option to choose. Arming this laser and obtaining the rangefinder weapon from a kid in Freeside grants the power to call down an orbital bombardment once a day wherever we want. It looks awesome and can make short work of some tougher outdoor fights. More of a selfish use, certainly, but if going with Yes Man's independent routes, a perfect means of further consolidating power. But here's by far the most evil use of Helios 1. On the plant control terminal, we also have the secondary option to arm the Archimedes plant defense system. In this case, in addition to routing power wherever we've chosen, Helios 1, once powered, will call down an orbital bombardment on itself. Not destroying the solar array, interestingly, but killing all NCR soldiers stationed outside. It's worth noting that the NCR still have no idea how this station works even after we get it up and running, and they're therefore basically a free protection service for the facility, incapable of actually tampering with it. If we wanted full unvetted control of Helios 1, then we already have that, and taking out the NCR may actually just open the doors to another faction who are capable of messing with it. So there's little reason therefore to choose this option. I mean, unless we wanted to make the place easier for the Legion to take, which itself is probably the most powerful evil faction in the game. So regardless of how we use Helios 1, taking out the NCR that guard it seems like a crazy decision to me. But if you did want to try it out, then the option does remain available for the rest of a playthrough, provided Helios 1 wasn't taken offline completely. Rose of Sharon Cassidy, aside from being an interesting name for a person, is in my opinion one of the best companions in Fallout New Vegas, with a personality and attitude that simply feels more fleshed out to me than many of the others. But ranking companions from worst to best is definitely a topic deserving of its own video. Instead, let's look today at the terrible fate that can perhaps befall Cass, losing her permanently as a companion. We'll first meet Rose of Sharon Cassidy down at the Southwest Mojave Outpost, where she'll be drinking away her sorrows after the total annihilation of her caravan business. If we've been sent here by Alice McClafferty of the Crimson Caravans, we can convince Cass to let go of the corpse that remains of her company, selling the name and all that's left to the Crimson Caravans, furthering their monopoly of trade across the Mojave. But after that, with seemingly nothing left to do, Cass can also accompany us as a companion. At this point, now being friends, we can take Cass to the final wreckages of her ransacked caravans, the leftover corpses at which point paint a clear picture. The destruction of Cassidy caravans wasn't a simple raider attack, but rather deliberately orchestrated by the Crimson Caravans and the Von Graff family, a group of arms dealers over in Freeside. At this point, Cass will seek revenge against both groups, which can simply be done with vigilante violence. Though bear in mind the Von Graffs are sitting on an absolute stockpile of plasma weaponry, or we can more sneakily secure evidence of the group's crimes and hand that over to the NCR, providing Cass the closure she longs for. However, upon visiting the Von Graffs for the first time, we'll get the additional option of starting to do some work for them. First as a bouncer, vetting anybody who comes inside the store. In fact, we can actually let a guy with a bomb in here, one of the easiest ways to destroy the Von Graffs. But progressing this quest for the family properly, we'll eventually get a request from Jean-Baptiste, who explains he has a loose end that needs tying up. All he needs us to do is bring Cass to him for a one-on-one chat, insisting that he just wants to talk to her. If we naively think, hey, maybe this will be a way for Cass and the Von Graffs to smooth things over, then we're making a terrible mistake. The moment we next speak to Jean-Baptiste with Cass in company, his true intentions become clear.
As I live and breathe, Rose of Sharon Cassidy, the late Rose of Sharon Cassidy, was hoping you were on that caravan I massacred, but Crimson Caravan and Van Graffs won't need to worry about you anymore. Well, hobby's ours, and we're shutting you down for good.
We're then left with a final choice. Leave Cass to her fate, or fight off one of the most heavily armed groups in the wasteland on their own turf, which, unless you're a very high level, is going to prove particularly difficult. We'd definitely have been better off letting them get bombed earlier. So, letting Cass be taken out will result in one of the most brutal things ever.
Hi, I'm John Baptiste, and you're about to stop being a pain in my ass.
Cass has died. No shit, Sherlock. More than that, she's been utterly vaporized. Though we can at least loot the ash pile in this case to get our own stuff back. What do we gain from this? Well, there is a follow-up encounter where the Von Graffs take down some of the Legion with the help of the NCR, with Gloria claiming that the NCR, despite their issues, are far more preferable than the all-consuming Caesar's Legion. And we get to keep our set of Von Graff combat armor this way, though as armors go, there are better sets out there. I suppose you could argue that the Von Graffs standing against the Legion is going to help more people, and Cass taking them down weakens the Legion opposed forces, but then there are plenty of other options for standing against the Legion. And having one of the most developed companions in the game vaporized before our very eyes is a major loss for us as a player. So yeah, on a personal level, I'm putting this down as one of the worst decisions we can make. Fallout New Vegas has a ton of different ways the game can potentially end, mostly denoted by the endgame slides that play after the second battle of Hoover Dam, summarizing what different factions, people, and places went on to do after the courier interfered with their lives. But to get to that point, we'll need to align ourselves with one of the four major players in the Mojave: Caesar's Legion, the NCR, Mr. House, or the Independent Yes Man. 4 factions for 4 different main endings. Fallout 4 did something similar with the Brotherhood, Railroad, Institute, and Minutemen, the pros and cons of which I discuss in my Fallout 4 Endings Ranked video. But the difference with New Vegas is that we may very well wind up committing and locking ourselves into one of these 4 factions very early on in the main string of quests. The first time we encounter Caesar's Legion, they'll ask us to destroy Mr. House's Securitron army under their fort, locking out his route if we listen to them. Similarly, when first meeting Yes Man, he'll suggest that we disable Mr. House and install him in the Lucky 38 instead. Committing to any main quests can pretty quickly force us to choose sides. Similarly, each faction will be attempting to garner the support or simply annihilate lesser factions around Vegas, like the Boomers and Brotherhood of Steel. And gaining, then pledging the support of any of those to one of the major 4 will quickly anger the others, prompting warning quests to indicate that we've been locked out of those routes. Now, Yes Man is an exception to this. Programmed as he is, Yes Man ensures we'll always have some way to complete the game even if we mess things up with the other 3. We cannot legitimately get rid of the Securitron, and even if he's killed, he just downloads onto another model. But as for the others, committing to one too soon in a playthrough accidentally can spell problems further down the line. Damaging our reputation with the NCR or Legion can turn encounters with them to become hostile throughout the wasteland, spelling a lot of travel issues with the NCR especially. What's more, the majority of New Vegas's content is in its side quests, many of which are faction affiliated to the Legion and especially to the NCR. So many quests, including some we've already looked at in this video, rely on a healthy NCR relationship. Mess that up, and you might as well just wander the wastes shooting at everything and everyone you see. Sure, that certainly could be an interesting playthrough in and of itself, but the highlights of Fallout New Vegas, in my opinion, are the stories and characters littered about the Mojave. I mean, is it any wonder that Season 2 of the TV show is leaning so heavily on New Vegas's lore and characters? And to therefore unknowingly lock yourself out of most of that is a real shame. So, if you're wanting to experience as much of the game's content as possible, maybe hold off on picking sides until you've seen a lot of what the Wasteland has to offer. Personally, I try to complete as much side content as possible, then make a hard save late into the game as a return point from which to side with and complete each faction ending fully. But of the 4 main factions we can side with for the endgame, one definitely stands out as the most evil and terrible group of people we could ever possibly affiliate ourselves with. And that is of course the NCR. because taxes. I'm kidding. Though don't get me wrong, the NCR does have its problems, plenty of them, and we'll look at that more in another video comparing the endings to New Vegas. But I think given a choice, pretty much everyone would and does choose the NCR over Caesar's Legion, a group who admire the Roman Empire so much, with the irony being that they all say Caesar rather than Caesar. And the way the Legion operates is actually fairly simple. It's basically a giant military that either assimilates smaller forces into itself or annihilates them. It does not and cannot permit other groups outside of itself to exist, because that would make the Legion weaker, allowing differences of opinion and different ways of doing things to take root, and ultimately probably leading to rebellion. The Legion is specifically designed to be a strong military force to survive in a post-apocalyptic world, and therefore the military itself is only comprised of stronger men, with women's main role in the Legion being to breed more children into this horrible life. Anybody not fit to fight then becomes a slave, a tool to carry out the Legion's domestic tasks, with no value of life placed on any one individual, as each simply makes up a small piece of this military autocracy. The only possible good thing we could say about them is they did clear up the raider tribes in Arizona, though that was basically by just forming them into this one giant raider tribe. And is that actually better overall or worse when we consider they made themselves strong enough to oppose factions who also have successful yet more peaceful ways of conducting life in the wastelands? No. Whilst the actual Roman legions did defeat barbarian hordes, I'd say this post-apocalyptic Caesar's Legion is just one giant barbarian horde itself. And come the time of the Fallout TV show, it's clear that this one unified military faction idea doesn't even work very well. What with a civil war going on to decide who the next Caesar is going to be. So it's not even like you could argue that Caesar's Legion is a good option for a strong, surviving humanity. Now again, don't get me wrong, the NCR, House, and Yes Man all have issues of their own too, but each pales in comparison to the Legion, something to certainly explore in more detail in another video. So be sure to subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss that, and massive thank you as always to the patrons and channel members for supporting more content like this from me. Cheers for watching, I'm Sam Bram, and I'll see you in the next one.